The Tribolo Weekender Homage was the first Chinese watch I ever bought from AliExpress, and since then, well, I bought more than I'd like to admit. And some of those have been pretty disappointing. A few, well, they've been okay. And a couple of them have actually been impressive, and this is one of the later. When I first heard about this online, all I knew about it was that it had a Hibeat movement and sapphire crystal for $37. And that was enough. Since then, I've learned a little bit more about it, and spec-wise, it seems almost too good to be true. It's the Starking AM0184. So I'm going to do this review a little different. And I'm going to start by listing the specs of the watch. Mostly because it's the specs that make this watch so interesting. Otherwise, it's really just a simple, clean-looking dress watch. So, the Starking is an automatic that's hackable and hand-windable. It's 40 millimeters with double sapphire crystals. And I've tested its power reserve to be around 36 hours, with a high beat movement. And I'm also not entirely sure about this, but Starking does say that they own their own movement manufacturer, so it's possible that it even has a in-house movement, so to speak. Which to me, for under $40, is fantastic. Now, I should point out that the price has been raised since then. It might have been that low for the sale, or they realized that they could really get more for it. But it's currently around $50, which is still not bad for what you're getting. But specs aren't everything. It's all about how the watch is put together as a whole. So let's start and look at the Starking in more detail. So first, I want to talk a little about the strap, which I'll get into more detail later. So right before I started filming this, I got a package delivered with some new straps, and I went a little crazy trying them on the Starking. So you'll see a few different straps in this video. So right now, I want to point out that this is the one it actually comes with. But anyways, the case itself is a very polished stainless steel, and the finishing is quite decent, until you get to the very bottom of the case, and specifically the lugs, which are a little flat, a little sharp, and a little rougher than the rest of the case. One thing I do like is the shape of the case. It's not just a round cylinder, but it tapers down thinner as it gets closer to your wrist. It's a nice touch, which gives it a little bit more of an elegant look. Now, I will say that the high polish finish, as well as the sapphire, are fingerprint magnets, and I had a hard time keeping this thing clean while trying to film it. Now, the dial itself is rather clean and simple, and it's a classic dress watch look, although it did remind me a bit of an Orient Symphony. There seem to be 4 variants of the Starking, with either a white or black dial, and either leather or metal bracelet. And I'll throw a link down below to the watch at AliExpress's official Starking store. The price might be a little bit higher, but it's probably more reliable than a random seller. Now, the dial is an off-white coloring. It has more of a matte flat finish. Although in sunlight, it does seem to look a little bit more silver, but I'm not sure if that's the dial itself or just light reflecting off the hands and indices and bouncing in between the white dial and the crystal. Now, the hour indicators are an applied metallic triangle, with the minute indicators painted on in black as a chapter ring that goes around the edge. A date window is at the 3 o'clock position. It's in black text with a white background. Now, at the top of the dial, it has a very small Starking logo, which I think is a decent size. It's not so small that you don't know what it is, but not so large that it's annoying. And below the hands, it just says automatic, Otherwise, that's pretty much it. The dial is rather clean and simple. Some dress watches are designed to stand out, and others like this are designed to blend in. Now the hands are a silver metallic triangular shape, and I believe the shape is referred to as Dauphine. Now above the dial is a flat sapphire crystal, and there isn't much case beyond the crystal. It's a fairly rounded design. To the right, you have a signed crown. Again, a nice touch. And as I said before, it is both hackable and hand-windable. The date is also quick set. Although one odd thing about this watch, the date begins to change right about 9 p.m. and switches over at 10 p.m. I'm not sure if it's just my watch and it happens to be a little misaligned, but I did find it a little odd. On the back of the watch is an exhibition screw-down case back. The text surrounding the case back simply remind you of the watch's spec, as well as a 50-meter water resistance. The center of the back crystal has the Starking logo, which appears to be a gold-colored foil, which I think gives it a really nice touch as you rotate the watch, and you see that pendulum go around the logo. Although one thing to note, the pendulum is a little on the loud side when it rotates. Not much, but I think it is noticeable. Now, I'm not an expert on movements, but from my amateur perspective, the movement looks rather well designed, at least compared to other movements I've seen from some Chinese watches. And I also appreciate the utilization of different colored materials inside the movement, such as the blue screws, which to me suggests that they made it with the idea of actually showing it off, compared to other Chinese watches where the addition of the exhibition caseback was more of an afterthought. Now the real special thing about the Starking is its Hibeat movement, which runs at about 28,800 beats per hour. It's a difference that you can see and hear compared to a regular movement. And one of the ways that you can check, or at least how I checked it, is to record the dial at high speed or slow motion, and then count the intervals between the seconds. A regular movement, which is more around 21,600 beats per hour, will have about 6 intervals between seconds, and a high beat, like this one, will be 8. The advantage of a high beat movement is that it not only looks smoother as it goes around the dial, but it is supposed to improve the accuracy and precision of the watch as well. Although, the trade-off is more wear on the movement as it's moving faster. Now in terms of accuracy, I found this one to be pretty good at about +6 seconds a day. So I don't know the specific movement that's in the Starking. Online, there's some speculation that it's one that's referred to as an Asian 2813 Hibeat, although that movement is only supposed to have a 30-hour power reserve, where I seem to have one that has 36. Now, since Starking does own their own movement manufacturing company, it is possible that it's their own in-house movement. The Starking is like a lot of Chinese watches. What's powering it is the biggest mystery of all. Now back to the strap. The strap the watch comes with is this reddish-brown, alligator-looking leather. Although the one I received looks much darker than what's on the photos. It's leather, it's thin, it's really what you'd expect on a $30 or $40 watch. So I can't really fault it for that. I just didn't really like it too much. It does have a signed buckle, but otherwise, I found it to be unimpressive. And to be honest, I didn't really spend much time on it. Most of the time that I wore it, I was using something else, like this green leather. Here are the full dimensions of the watch. As I said, it's 40 millimeters wide without the crown, 43 with the crown. Lug to lug is about 47. And it's relatively thin for an auto at 11.5 millimeters. It utilizes 20 millimeter straps and is a bit light at 62 grams. So while it does have a 20 millimeter strap, I did find the lug width to be a very tight 20 millimeters. Measuring it, I found it to be about 20.2. So you may have a hard time getting some 20 millimeter straps in it. And I particularly had a hard time with a metal bracelet that I just couldn't quite get in. So if I had to do it over again, I would probably opt for the metal bracelet version for just a little bit more, just to make sure that I had one that would fit. So here it is on my 7-inch wrist. And as I said earlier, I like it better on other straps. But regardless, it wears well. It's a good size for a dress watch and relatively thin, so it shouldn't really get in the way of any long sleeve shirts or jackets. And since the case tapers as it heads towards your wrist, it seems to wear a little bit smaller than it actually is. It's also light enough that you don't really notice it. This is actually the second Starking that I've gotten, the other being a $20 quartz chrono that's still on my to-do list. But overall, the Starking AM0184 is a good, clean, and simple dress watch with some impressive specs for the price. There are a lot of other automatic dress watches with similar looks, including the Orient Symphony. And you can usually find those at around $100. So spec-wise, the Starking's a pretty good price at $50, especially considering it has Sapphire. Although on a personal level, I think this is a watch for me that's more about what's under the hood than the entire design of it. I think it's almost a little too clean, a little too simple, at least for my taste. Basically, I think it's a bit boring. Although that said, the more I began to change straps, the more I began to appreciate its clean look. The nice thing about a white dial is that it pretty much goes with anything. It's basically a blank canvas that you can really do whatever you want with it. Put on a more casual strap, and you got a great watch for summer. Now, I do think that if Starking were to take that Hibeat movement and livened up the design a little bit, perhaps gave it a more interesting dial, maybe some different hands, then they could really have something interesting. So my biggest concern about the Starking is actually the thing that makes it special. It's Hibeat movement. Since no one really knows what it is, there's no track record for reliability. But at less than $50, it might be worth it. So I mentioned the Orient Symphony because I recently got one, and it's on my to-do list of watches to review. But let me know in the comments what you think about the Starking, and specifically if you'd like to see a comparison between it and the Orient Symphony, since they do seem to look alike. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for joining me, and until next time.